Well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. We have a nice, quaint group. We've had a really fun weekend, haven't we, with Colby?
Yes.
Most of us have been to everything. Yeah. But anyway, we're glad to have the Greens here tonight, and my brother, and Ashton. Well, he's a family now, and Monty, my adopted child, is here.
Hey, hi, Auntie.
So we've got some visitors here.
Auntie cuts a mean avocado.
Yeah.
You need an avocado cut.
Monty, you should see it. She may go to culinary school. Very, very evenly sliced, and all the avocados were perfect. And, I mean, that's a talent. Who can do that? I should have taken a picture and bragged on you. But anyway, really happy to have you here. This is a more of a casual sort of, it's not really a service, just sort of a talking to Colby kind of opportunity, which is always fun. And I wanted to just sort of introduce him by honoring a gift that a good friend of mine has donated for Colby tonight. But I thought rather than just send him home with it in a box, I wanted to share it with you all because I think it has a lot of cool meaning. It's a friend of mine. He's a local artist. He does pottery. He does this vapor fire finish. He's kind of working with something new here, and he told me that this is really special to him because he supports what we do here, and he really appreciates how we really emit the love of God and the beauty that we share here at Bonsack. But also, it means a lot because of the pain that he's gone through. He's a 2-time cancer survivor, and as he makes this piece, he thinks about the pain that he's gone through and with each cut. But he also, he feels like the light is a metaphor for how we can let Jesus' love in and then reflect his love out. And I thought it was a great metaphor for the harm that is done to the LGBTQ community every day. I know a lot of us, it means a lot to most of us, which is why we support this type of thing and everything we do in this church. But I personally feel like I get another hole every morning I read the news and about another attack on people like my child. And it's really hard to deal with. So I think this represents, sort of what we do and what motivates why we come to this church and why we support these type of events, why we get to Pride, why we like to emit the love of God and the beauty that can really show through us if we do what we're supposed to. And that's what motivates Colby and Stan Mitchell that came to see us last fall. It's what motivates their work, and it's such holy work, and we're so excited to have Colby tonight to chat with. So I just wanted you to appreciate the beauty of the gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colby, take it away.
Are you going to give it to me? Do I get it?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is the note, and if anybody wants to know how to get a hold of him, just let me know.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And we're really excited to hear from you tonight, Colby. I've really enjoyed hanging with you this weekend. I never thought I would ever have this opportunity. I never thought he would say yes to coming to visit us, but he did.
And yet, here we are. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, again.
Hello.
It's good to see most of you. Just kidding. It's good to see all of you, of course. Thanks for those of you who came back, who were here this morning, and made your way back this evening to hang out with us. And thanks for those of you who came here for the first time tonight. Here's what I thought we'd do. Okay, so this morning in the Sunday school time, we talked a little bit about my work with my first book on clobber. Then during the church service, I shared kind of this bigger concept of my belief in a God who favors and prefers diversity over uniformity. There's something profoundly beautiful when you mix together parts that are different than all being the same. And one thing I didn't say this morning that I wanted to touch on real quick here is that there's a book called The Holy Longing by Ronald Rolheiser, I think that's his name. And Ronald, he's a Catholic priest, and he talks about church in the following manner. He says, where else in your life do you get the opportunity to regularly interact with and build a kind of communal relationship with people who are markedly different from you? He says there's something about church that gives you the chance, the opportunity to not only rub shoulders with, but get to know and have them for dinner and go to their house for dinner and get to know the kids. Like you actually get to practice doing life with people who are different than you are. And there's something really meaningful and powerful about that. And part of what I take from that is, part of what I love about churches like this that do elevate a sense of diversity is you do get to then practice doing life with people who are different from you, and that's a good thing. And that there should be something that animates us to want to practice getting to know people who are very different from us. It's hard, we talked about this morning. The wide path, the easy path, is to just hang out with people who are like-minded and like-valued, look like us, talk like us, think like us. The narrow path, it's harder, but what if we intentionally made an effort to build relationships with people who are different from us? Anyway, so that was this morning, and then tonight, what I wanted to do, so this is my second book. This is called The Shift. The subtitle is Surviving and Thriving After Moving from Conservative to Progressive Christianity. And the idea behind this book, it came to me a couple years ago as I'd been doing this ministry work, sometimes it's dealing with people, but shepherding and guiding and counseling and leading people who have either left their more conservative church worlds, or in some cases been kicked out of, you know what I mean? Asked to leave. They've left their more conservative church world, or family, or community, and they're on a journey towards something. They still want to stay connected to Christianity in some way. They're not ready to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater of conservative fundamentalist religion. They want to hold on to some tether to the heritage of Christianity, but they need it to be done in a more, pick your adjective here, open, inclusive, expansive, progressive, grace-filled manner. And so on that journey, what I've noticed is there's all sorts of similarities that show up for people. That movement from, and again, I'm using these labels that may or may not help you, by the way. If labels don't help you, don't use them. I identify as a progressive Christian. Is that exactly perfectly true about me? Maybe not. There's some things about progressivism that I don't really connect with. And there's some things about, by and large, popular Christianity that I don't connect with. But it's a helpful term for me to describe the spectrum of like conservative fundamental Christianity moving towards a kind of progressive Christianity. And I've noticed that as people have gone on this journey, they tend to run into some of the same kinds of obstacles. So this was my attempt to write a kind of survival guide for that experience. And I want to talk a little bit about that tonight, but I'm going to do it in a way that kind of summarizes. I've been calling this the summary of my life's work. Of all the things that I have learned and believed and unbelieved and rebelieved over the last 20 years of being a pastor, is there a way that I could sum it up? Is there a way that I could articulate when I distill out all of the nonsense and I try to get down to just the thing that really, really seems to fundamentally matter most, and really what I believe is the secret to a life of flourishing, a life of abundance? What would that sound like? How would I describe that? So that's what I want to share with you tonight. So I'm going to do that over the course of the next maybe, 20, 25 minutes or so. And then what I would like to do is I'd like to open it up to have a conversation similar to like we did this morning for those of you who were there. Where I might throw a couple questions at you and you can absolutely throw questions my way and we'll just kind of see where the night takes us. So if you have any questions at all about any of the things I talked about this morning or anything in my first book, or if anything I say tonight strikes a chord with you and you're curious about it, we'll have a chance to talk about that here in about 20 or so minutes. How's that sound?
Yeah. Good.
Perfect. Wow. Your enthusiasm is contagious. I certainly feel better about the night because of your enthusiasm, so thank you. All right, let's start like this. If you would be so kind as to join me in just a moment. I'm going to close my eyes just because it helps me eliminate distraction, but you can do what you want. And for a moment, I'd like you to take your right hand and place it wherever on your body reminds you that you are alive. So for some, this might be your heart. You might be able to feel your heart beating. For some, maybe it's your wrist, and you can feel the beats in your wrist. Maybe for some, this is where I put my hand, I put it right on my diaphragm, right on my stomach. I took, in college, I was in choir, and I took singing lessons in college, and I learned how to breathe with my diaphragm, and so this is where I now feel my life force. So I invite you to place your hand somewhere on your body. And now, would you, with me, take as deep a breath as you can. Just breathe in as deep as you can. And then let it out. And it's possible that for some of us today, that might have been the first mindful breath of the day. And what I mean by that is breathing for most people is probably something they take for granted. They don't really think about it. It's just kind of there in the background. Every once in a while you're reminded of it when your heart races and you can feel your breath increasing, or maybe when you're exercising, or maybe you've got a sickness that makes breathing as strong. But mostly, we don't really think about our breath. Take another deep breath in with me. And exhale. And I do this mindful breath work. I do this calling attention to this thing that usually we don't pay attention to. I do this because, at least for me, it's a reminder of life. It's a reminder of this moment. It's a reminder of the fact that this next breath that I'm about to take right now, I did not do a thing to earn or deserve. I really didn't. I didn't do anything to earn that. It was just there. And I breathed. And I bring this up because for me, life is a gift. And it is not something that really I didn't do anything to earn this day. Lord willing, I'll be here tomorrow, and I didn't really do anything to earn that. It's just a gift. And today I get to spend that gift with meeting new friends in a new city, eating good food, having good conversation. And it's all grace. It's all a gift. And in my best moments, I take that gratitude and I open it up from my heart space and I say, God, thank you. Thank you for my breath. Thank you for my life. Thank you for this day. Yeah, there's a lot I could complain about. Yep, I could. But at this moment, I'm grateful for breath and for life. So take one more deep breath in with me. And exhale. Amen. All right. So I was born into a conservative religious family. My dad came from a long line of Baptists. My mom was a first-generation Christian. And so we were raised going to church, multiple times a week, choir practice, youth group, multiple church services. My parents got a divorce when I was somewhere between 7 and 11, I'll be honest. Those years were pretty foggy. see the aforementioned parents' divorce. That's for the trauma that blocked out the memories there. But somewhere in that time frame was my parents' separation and divorce. And, like I think we talked about it this morning, somebody brought up the fact that the church has kind of moved on from seeing divorce as an issue. Wasn't really the case in 1990, when my parents got divorced. And so at our Baptist church, there was, my dad left / was removed from the church. And so my mom and me and my 2 brothers were left to stay behind. And as my mom tells the story, we just, slowly as a family, we just didn't really have a place there anymore. So after maybe a year or 2 of trying to do the single mom at a Baptist church thing, she's like, let's just get a fresh start. So we found ourselves at kind of a generic evangelical, non-denominational church in Albany, Oregon. That's where I grew up. And so those were my high school years were spent at this evangelical church. And I went to church because my mom took us and because, I just wanted something to do, but it wasn't because I had any interest in things of God or Christianity. But I went on a trip my senior year of high school, right before high school, down to Southern California for this youth experience where they would train high schoolers. In the morning, we'd wake up and they'd train us on apologetics. And they'd train us how to go out and defend the faith and street witness to people. And then they'd send us out in the afternoons, 2 by 2, because it's biblical, obviously, into the beaches of California to walk up to strangers and just open up the conversation with, real casual, lighthearted, hey, if you died right now, do you know where you'd go? It's just oh my gosh, look, who does that? We did that, because that's what we were taught to do. And so we would go and we would, try to convince people that if they said a prayer with us, then that they would go to heaven when they died. And I remember that first afternoon, coming back from that trying to save people's souls on Huntington Beach outside of Los Angeles. And I came back to the room that I was staying at, and I laid on my bed. I just started weeping, which I don't really remember prior to that the last time I cried. I was just sobbing. And it was one of those moments where I felt as though it was like God was saying to me, not an audible voice, I had this sense that God was saying to me, Colby, you can in this moment, this is a pivotal week for you. You get to make a choice. You can keep going with your life as it is, and what that meant for me at the time is pretty self-centered, typical 17-year-old, everything's about me, all my efforts are just to try to be cooler and more popular, blah, blah, blah. You can just kind of keep doing that and make life all about you. Or, I think God said, or you can use this week to really make the choice that you want your life to be about something bigger than you. To be about, back then I would have framed it as to be about telling people about God. Essentially that was my call that week to be a pastor. And I get up from the bed, and my roommate my buddy comes walking in, and I'm wiping the snot off my face, and he's asking me what's wrong. And I'm trying to describe to him this experience that I just had. And I remember that night going to the worship service, music and the speaker and all that. And I remember for the first time just this overwhelming presence. I don't know. I heard someone once describe it as though an egg got cracked at the crown of your head, and you just felt this kind of this dripping, cooling, this tingling sensation. I don't really know how to describe it, but it was similar to that, where it was as though I really was of the belief that this was the moment for me to decide what I wanted to do in my life, which is a big decision to make as a 17-year-old. And I thought, okay, that's it. I think I'm being called to be a pastor. I think this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I'd already applied to colleges to be a graphic designer, and I thought I had that all set. But I came back from that trip determined to be a pastor. And so I enrolled at a local Baptist college and got my degree in pastoral ministry. And all I want to tell you about that is I was a really good student. I excelled. I became known as the Bible answer guy, right? People that asked me the questions and I'd have the answers for them. And I only tell you that because it sets up a later point in the story. It's not that I think it's all that great to be a Bible answer guy, but
They were removed for COVID.
Do you guys have Bibles in this church? Only a little bit of shade. That's all right. 1 Corinthians 13. You're fine. Most churches I visit don't have Bibles anymore either. It's pretty normal. Okay, so Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians 13. He says, look, if I speak in the tongues of men or angels, in other words, if I'm the most eloquent of speakers, and I know all the arguments, but if I don't have love, I'm just a loud gong. I'm just a clanging cymbal. I could have the gift of prophecy. I can fathom all the mysteries and all the knowledge. I can know all of the deep things there is to know. I can have faith that can move mountains, but if I don't have love, it really doesn't matter for anything. I could give away everything I have to the poor. I could even sacrifice my own body for that cause, but if I don't have love, I gain nothing. And so you hear from Paul this sense of elevating the importance of love. You can have everything else that the world seems to value. But if it doesn't have love, then it's really, who cares? It really doesn't matter on the final equation of things. things. And that's then verse 4, you get to love is patient, love is kind, doesn't envy, and so on. Which, by the way, if I have signed your book yet, when I sign on Clobber, I always sign in, always trust love, it never fails. Because I actually believe that. And it happens to be something that Paul wrote. Love never fails. I think we can always trust love, it never fails. Moving on. Then he ends that little chapter with this. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, the things that are partial will disappear. And keep in mind, if you don't know this already, this might be new for you, but many of you probably know this, that the first generation of Christians, they assumed Jesus was going to come back at any moment. Like that was he'll return like a thief in the night. Their assumption was, yeah, he went away, the ascension, that was kind of weird, but he's going to come back within our lifetime, and that's when he's going to sort of do his real Messiah work. And so a lot of, again, what we read in here has this energy of, like, it's going to come any moment now. When the Messiah finally comes back, then we'll know everything. Verse 11, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away the ways of childhood behind me. And you start to see him develop this illustration of growing and transforming and maturing. Verse 12, for now we see only like a reflection in a mirror. We don't really see it super clear, it's a little bit muddy, it's a little bit, the image is reversed. But then, finally, when the Lord returns, we shall see face to face. Now we only know in part, but then we will know fully. So there's this, he's building up to this argument of here's the things that the world thinks is important, but really love is the thing that matters most. And I used to think like a child, but now I think like a man. And when the perfect comes, all's going to be made clear. And then this all builds up to this crescendo of verse 13. And now these three remain. And the image I conjure up there is, once everything fades away, these three things remain. Do you remember what those three things are? Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. When I think about faith, I think it's common for us in the church world to hear the word faith and immediately think, oh, my faith is the things that I believe. My faith equals the things that I believe. And here's what happened when we think like that. When I was a child, I thought like a child. I used to have a whole bunch of different beliefs that I don't have anymore. And odds are, you do too. I'm going to guess that if you're in this room, there are some things that you used to believe that now you not only believe like 180 degrees differently than, but it's almost impossible for you sometimes, at least it's true, it is for me, it's almost impossible for me to even put myself back in the version of myself that believed that. It's so foreign to me. I can't even remember, I really used to believe that? That's wild to me. And other times, we might have changed our beliefs. Other beliefs we might have just discarded altogether. And what I found happens, so again, my big thing here is people shifting from a conservative fundamental religion into something more liberal, progressive, open, inclusive, however you want to describe it. When people make this shift, a lot of times the catalyst for it, or one of the fallouts for it, is that it is a changing of so many of our beliefs. We just don't believe a lot of the same things we believe anymore. And what I have found people have said over and over again when I do this work is they'll say some version of the following. I think I lost my faith. Or, my faith just isn't what it used to be. Or, man, what happened to my faith? And they say that, I think, because they have connected this idea of faith to the list of things they used to believe. And if our faith is just a list of things we believe, then now, once these start changing and being left behind, now we think our faith has been somehow altered or impacted. But faith, I submit to you, is not synonymous with the things that we believe. So instead, I invite people to think about faith as a verb. It's an action. It's a way that It's almost like a posture that we have to the world. And I'll back that up with just a couple of quick stories from the Gospels. So there's, and I'm going to go through this real quick, because we don't have all night. In the Gospels, you have multiple times where Jesus interacts with an individual and says some version of the following: your faith has saved you. Here's a couple examples of that. You have the Roman centurion whose servant falls sick, and he sends word to go get Jesus to come and help. And if you remember the story, Jesus doesn't even get to the centurion's house because the centurion sends out a guy's ahead and says, I don't even deserve to have him come to my house. I just believe that he could heal from afar. And Jesus is like, wow, I haven't seen faith like that in all of Israel. Your faith has saved you. Or in this case, your servant. Another time, there's a woman who had been bleeding for years and years and years and years, some medical condition, and she's exhausted her life savings trying to find a solution for it, trying to find healing, and nothing. No doctors, no amount of science, no amount of finances have been able to fix this condition. And yet, one afternoon, Jesus is walking by, and she is almost like in desperation. She just almost like throws herself out and just barely touches the hem of Jesus' cloak, and somehow in that moment, there was this rush of healing power that Jesus was like, figured out who it was, and says, your faith has made you whole. Faith has made you whole. Then there's another woman, she's a Canaanite woman, which is like a different religion altogether, and she comes to Jesus and pleads with Jesus to help heal her daughter. And the subtext there is, she looked for answers in her own religion, didn't find it, and so came to this like wandering Jewish rabbi that she had heard stories about healing. He said, can you help my daughter? And again, Jesus is impressed with his faith. He says, your faith has made your daughter whole. Your faith has saved you. And then the last story that I'll bring up is the woman in the Gospel of John who isn't given a name other than this: sinner. The woman known as a sinner. She crashes a party that Jesus was at the Pharisee's house one night. And you remember this story, right? She breaks this jar of perfume and cleanses Jesus' feet and dries it with her hair and has this beautiful gesture of love. And obviously the Pharisees are real annoyed at this. And Jesus tells them to back off and applauds that this woman has done. And tells this woman, go in peace, your faith has saved you. Now, in each of these stories, you notice sometimes I said your faith has saved you, your faith has healed you, your faith has made you whole. That's all the same word. The Greek word is sozo, S-O-Z-O. And that word, it can be translated as saved, but if you do that in English, you end up conjuring ideas of life after death. This is kind of what we think of when we think of the word saved. But sozo isn't about life after death. Sozo, more literally translated, means to be made whole, to be made complete. And it really is about a reality, a lived experience that happens here and now. It is to be rescued from that which breaks us apart. It is to be freed from that which oppresses us. And in each of these stories, Jesus says, your faith has sozoed you. And the word for faith, the Greek word there, is the Greek word pistis. And pistis is almost always translated as faith in the New Testament. And I would suggest that this isn't really the best English word for the Greek word pistis. Really, a better translation of the Greek here would be the idea of faithfulness or trust. Because faith is just, you could think of it as a cognitive exercise, but pistis is about an embodied belief, or an embodied trust. Okay, so what am I saying here? Jesus says to these four individuals, your pistis has sozoed you. Your trust has made you whole. And I'm telling you all this because I'm backing up. If faith is just about the things that we believe, then when Jesus says your faith has saved you, I would ask you, what belief statement did any of these characters demonstrate that elicited this comment from Jesus? None. None of these characters offered a belief statement. None of them said, I believe you are Jesus, the Son of God, Messiah, or, well, certainly, fun fact, certainly none of the four of these people were Christians. Because to be a Christian hadn't even existed yet, right? You know that, right? To be a Christian is historically the thing that happens after the death and resurrection of Jesus. So when Jesus is still alive, women and these soldiers, they weren't Christian in the traditional sense. So to say your faith has saved you cannot, in my estimation, mean that there was some belief statement that they held that gave them some sort of ticket into life after death, because none of what happened in those stories has anything to do with that. So this is why I say that faith is more like a verb. It's a thing that we do. It's a posture that we have, because each of the characters in these 4 stories exhibited a posture. A posture of what, you ask? Thanks for asking. A posture of openness and humility. A posture that says, I have come to the end of myself. I've come to the end. I realize that money cannot save me. I realize that science and doctors cannot save me. I realize that the government and the empire cannot fix this. I realize that my religion can't make this better. I realize that my society and my community can't fix this. All of these people come to the end and realize that it's as though they throw themselves before Jesus, and all they have is this posture of openness. I got nothing. Can you help? This, I submit to you, is what pistis looks like. It's this open posture of trust. Now these 3 remain: faith, hope, and love. Faith is this posture of openness. So what about hope? Hope, really quick. Hope for me is a refusal to fall to despair. Despair is the belief that it's only going to be bad and it's going to be like this forever. Hope, on the contrast, like Julian of Norwich says, is this trust that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Hope is the sense that no matter what it looks like right now, somehow, some way, this is not the end of the story. That it can and will be better. Hope says that no matter what kind of Friday I am experiencing, Sunday always comes after Friday. There's a story in the Gospels where Jesus is with his friends in a boat, and there's a great storm that comes. Remember this story? Jesus falls asleep somehow. Impressive. And the disciples freak out. Which makes sense, small boat, big storm, scary. And they wake up Jesus and wake up, like there's a storm. Can you do something about this? Which I find a little bit interesting, by the way. Side note. I wonder what it was about them. I wonder what it was about Jesus at that point that made them think that he could have done anything. They'd seen enough weird things with maybe healing humans that somehow they might have just thought, I don't know, maybe he can do something about the weather. Like you and I, we take that for granted at this point. Like, oh yeah, Jesus, the power, storms, all that. But come on, when you have never seen or heard it before, that's a big leap to make. I bet Jesus can help. Really, why? Turns out they were right, okay, so obviously that worked out. But I just still think it's funny to think about what they would have thought in that first moment. But anyway, wake up, Jesus. There's a storm. Do something about it. Now, in 2 of the Gospels, they write it one particular way, but I actually prefer the way Mark writes it. And Mark writes it like this. The disciples wake up Jesus. Jesus calms the storm. And then, I love this, and then he turns to his disciples and he says, why are you so afraid? And I like that ordering a lot. The other ordering is disciples wake up Jesus, Jesus wakes up, why are you so afraid? Then calms the storm. That checks out. Mark, Jesus calms the storm, then turns to the disciples, why are you so afraid? The reason why I love that is because honestly, sometimes, for me, and you might relate to this yourself, for me sometimes, the calm after the storm is way scarier than the storm itself. Another way to say that is sometimes the prospect of healing can terrify us. Another way to say that is sometimes, if we're honest, we kind of like being the victim. We kind of like being the person that everyone feels bad for. We don't really like it, it's miserable, it's awful, but also we know our part in that story. We know who we are in the midst of the storm. We've lived it long enough where we're a little bit familiar with it. You ever wonder why Jesus said to the guy who was sort of lame and sat by the pool of Bethesda, and there was this legend that whenever the water was stirred, whoever got into the water next would get healed? And Jesus goes, this man had been there for like, what, 30 years or something, and he's never made it in. And do you remember what Jesus asked him? Jesus says, do you want to get well? And I think that sometimes that's a legitimate question to ask. Like, do you really want to get well? And most people think, oh yeah, of course I want to get well. But honestly, you guys, I have been through periods, and this is certainly true for me last year. I have been through periods of deep depression and despair. And a belief that maybe not existing would be better than existing. And in some of those moments, if someone would have just asked me, do you want to be well? I would have been like, yeah, of course I want to be well, obviously. But also, I don't know, that's real scary. That's real scary, because when you're on the other side of the storm, well, then you don't have the storm to kind of blame for how hard your life is. Well, then you don't have the storm to explain to other people, well, I'm sorry I was late. I got this storm that I got to deal with. What do you mean? The storm ended 3 weeks ago. Oh yeah, I guess it's just me now. So I think my point here is that hope is really vulnerable. Hope is vulnerable. It's easier sometimes to just let yourself be like, life sucks and it's always going to be hard. Sometimes that's easier. But to hope that things might actually be better someday, and that things might be okay, and that you might be okay, that's scary. But I think that's the kind of posture that the Spirit invites us to. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. Faith is this posture of openness, this sense of like, out there is a light, a love that I'm going to stay open to. That is the thing that I can do in life, is remain open. As Michael Singer says, nothing is worth closing over. Nothing is worth closing over. If you take nothing away from you here tonight, write that down. Nothing is worth closing my heart over. Nothing is worth closing my heart over. Faith, hope the sense that all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, even when maybe everything around me says otherwise. And then love, the greatest of these, is love. If I have not love, I've got nothing. We were talking last night at Mary Beth in Kevin's place, and in Gaga's place, it's your place too. And several of us were talking about this concept of love, and how it is that what if the whole point of everything, what if the only thing that matters really is love? Like, what if at the end of the day that's all that matters? Because I kind of think that's true. I kind of think that these three remain: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. If I don't have love, I could have everything else and it wouldn't even matter. But Colby, you gotta make sure that you believe the right things. Do you? Look, I don't want to discount or discredit belief altogether. Some beliefs are better than others. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Some beliefs are better than others. What do I mean by better than others? I mean they produce better fruit. Okay? We can look at some beliefs of like fundamentalist religion, and we can look at the fruit that creates, and we can say that is rotten, nasty, death-bearing fruit. So therefore, the belief behind it gotta be bad. And there are then beliefs that produce life. I mean, Paul tells us peace and joy and faithfulness and gentleness. Like if these are the things that are coming out of people's beliefs, then the beliefs has to be good. Okay, so some beliefs are better than others. Yes, I'm 100% there. But what if the only thing that matters is love? And you might be asking, what do you mean by the only thing that matters? Here's what I mean. At the end of the day, the only question that really has anything to do with anything is, why are we here? What's the point of all this? And if there is a God, how do we ensure that we're okay with that God? I mean, we are on a space rock hurtling through an expanding galaxy. By the grace of who knows what, we're not just flying off this thing. It's weird. It's a weird universe that we inhabit. And somehow we're on this spinning orb of dirt and water. Why? Why are we here? And if there is a God, what do we do about that? Somewhere along the way, the religion of Christianity, which started as a movement of people who were convinced that loving your enemy was important, that loving your neighbor mattered, that kindness and compassion and forgiveness and mercy, like that this was a way of life that actually meant something. Somewhere along the way, that transformed into a religion that said you have to believe the right things. And I noticed that when Paul says, when everything else fades away, these three remain, faith, hope, and love, none of that to me has to do necessarily with doctrine or theology. Love for me has to be what it's all about. And I was talking with some folks last night, I think one of the 7 Jeffs that go here. talking to one of the Jeffs. And we were talking about how religion is terrified of this prospect that love is the only thing that matters. And I don't mean to speak negatively of religion. I love religion. Religion is a great neutral tool that humans have developed over time to sort of organize ourselves within a context of sacred ritual and figure out together in community who we are, why we're here, and who God is, and how we figure that out. Religion's fine. It can be a tool for disaster, and it can be a tool for great beauty. Fine. But religion, I think, and especially those who are invested in a kind of self-perpetuation, and especially those who have bought into this idea of gatekeeping, especially those who think that beliefs are what matter most. You got to believe the right things, which basically just means believe what I think. The idea that love is the only thing that matters is terrifying to them. So terrifying, in fact, that when that religion, when that mindset, when that paradigm meets unconditional love face to face, what does it do? It puts it on that. That's what it does to unconditional love. It is so terrifying. Unconditional love is so terrifying to a religious orientation in the world that it nails it to a cross because it doesn't know what else to do with it. Sometimes I make the joke, I won't make it tonight because it's kind of already been spilt, but sometimes I just make the joke, I'm like, you know what I wish? I really wish, this would have been, literally, God, this would have been so helpful. Would have been so helpful if while Jesus was alive doing his public ministry, which wasn't very long, somewhere between 1 and 3 years, I wish someone at some point would have just asked him point blank, Jesus, just tell us, what's the most important? What matters most? What's the most important thing? I wish someone would just ask him straight up. And of course, the punchline is, well, they did. And he did have an answer for that. And his answer was, the most important is love. Oh, you want more than that? Fine. Love God with everything you got. Heart, soul, mind, strength, every part of you, love. If I have to pick up 1B, that's like 1A, 1B, they're kind of the same thing. They all flow from the same thing. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. That's the most important thing. But what about what happens during the Eucharist? What about transubstantiation versus consubstantiation? Let's go with love. But what about baptism? I mean, do we dunk or do we sprinkle? As a baby or as an adult? It's cool. You guys can do what you want, but I'm telling you, the most important thing is love. Okay, but what about the rapture? Are you a premillennialist or an amillennialist? Guys, this is a fun discussion. I love it, but really I'm telling you the most important thing is love. Religion doesn't know what to do with that. In fact, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, religion says, okay, but who's my neighbor? Like, give me the loophole that I can walk through to figure out, because there's got to be some caveat to this. It can't be that simple, Jesus. It can't be that simple. Who is my neighbor? What if it really is that simple? One of my favorite stories that Jesus told. He said a father had 2 sons. And the younger son, if you recall, requested of his father to get his share of the inheritance. Like, basically, Dad, can you just fast forward your death so that I can have my share of the will now? And the dad acquiesces. Okay, son. And the son goes off and wastes it all and finds himself alone, penniless. And he thinks to himself, man, even if I was just a servant of my dad's estate, I'd be better off in this condition. And he has this plan. You guys remember his plan? He's going to go back, he's going to grovel at his dad's feet, he's going to beg him to forgive him. In fact, there's this moment in the story where the storyteller, Jesus, in this case, Jesus says, when he came to himself, and that's a whole other beautiful thing to talk about there. When the son came to himself, he realized what he had done, the choices he had made. And so he has this plan to go back to his dad. And you guys know the story. The dad sees him from afar. He runs out to meet him. And before the son can even get a word out of apology or a word out of begging for forgiveness, the dad throws his arms around his son, kisses him on the neck, puts a ring on his finger, and drapes a robe around him, and throws a party, rejoiced that my son has finally come home. And the older brother, he's the one that stuck around. He's the one that did all the right things. He's the one that knew all the right answers. He followed the rules. He was pretty angry that his dad threw this lavish party for his brother who was so very irresponsible and so very, just everything in the older brother's mind, everything that was anti how their dad raised them. So he doesn't go to the party. So the dad comes and finds him. What are you doing, son? Why aren't you partying with us? And the older son is just frustrated. He's like, Dad, I never left. I stuck around. I did everything right. I followed all the rules. I believed the right things. And yet, you never even gave us a goat so me and my buddies could have a party. And the dad, in one of the most poignant sentences in all the New Testament, the dad responds to his oldest son, and I can only imagine the deep compassion in the father's heart as he sees his son struggle to grasp probably what his dad's been trying to teach him his entire life. You know what it's like when you can really try to teach your child something day after day after day after day, and you're flabbergasted that they still maybe aren't really getting it. So the father says to his oldest son, "Hey, bud," that's my translation. "Hey, bud, everything I have has always been yours. Everything I have has always been yours." Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. Faith is this posture of openness, Nothing is worth closing over. Hope is this sense that all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Love? We get to love when we realize that both the younger brother and the older brother both had a problem with deserve. The younger brother thought he didn't deserve his father's love. I have screwed up too many times. I have done too many wrong things. I have wandered too far. I don't deserve your love. The older son had an equally wrong way of thinking. The older son thought he did deserve God's love, the Father's love. They both had a problem with love, thinking didn't deserve, do deserve. When it comes to love, y'all, deserving has nothing to do with it. You are loved by God because you are loved by God. It's as simple as that. Honestly, truly, it's as simple as that. You are a loved child of God just as you are. You can't do anything to screw that up. That's good news. You know what's also good news? You can't earn it either. I know some of us, like me, that's bad news because I like to really earn things. I'm much more drawn to the older brother. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to show you how awesome I am. And God just has to constantly remind me, like, hey, bud, that's really cool what you did. I'm proud of you. I'm going to hang it up on the refrigerator. But you know, everything I have has always been yours. You don't get any extra for that. You have everything already. You have my love already, all of it, all of it. Love is when we get to that point where we stand in the true identity of who we are, which is a loved child of God. And when we live from that place, suddenly we become this conduit. Because when I know that I am loved by God just as I am, and I don't ever got to do anything to earn that, and I can't ever screw that up, suddenly I don't need to extract that from Megan. I don't need to try to hustle to earn Megan's love because I have all these gaps and these insecurities. I can just be grounded. I'm okay, I'm loved. You know what? I can give this away. I've got this never-ending on-tap of love. I can just turn this spigot and give it away. I'm never going to run out. Never going to run out. I'm loved just as I am. Now these three remain, and all else fades away, and all else is going to fade away. And some of you, many of you in this room, have seen all things fade away in your life probably multiple times over. You've run out of energy, you've run out of money, you've run out of friends, you've run out of community, you've run out of health, you've run out of loved ones, you've run out of a lot of things. When all those things run out, these things remain. Faith. Have a posture of openness. Nothing's worth closing your heart over. Stay open. Hope. Believe that all things are going to be well, and all manner of things will be well, that Sundays always follow Fridays. And love, the greatest of these, which is that you are a loved child of God. That's really good news. You know what else is good news? Everyone else is also a fully loved child of God. Everyone else is also a fully loved child of God. I think, for me, this distills kind of everything that I've learned in my 20 years of being a pastor about what it means to be a human, what it means to be in relationship to others and to myself and to God. And I think this is maybe the secret to life. To have this posture of openness, a belief that things are going to be okay, and that I am loved by God no matter what. That's what I want to share. And I'm done. That concludes. So now we're going to have the ushers come forward, and we're going to take it off. And I'm just kidding. So here's what I thought we could do next. It's already 8 o'clock? Okay. What did you say this thing was going to go till? Did you have it in time?
No.
You said 10 o'clock? All right, Megan said this goes for another 2 hours. No, maybe I think you were trying to aim for 8. Okay, let's just do this. I'd love to know what has come up for you in any of this. And this could be questions, doesn't have to be questions. This could just be a sharing for you. What has this stirred in your heart? What did you notice shimmered in you? What felt light? What felt heavy? what was hard for you to hear, what felt really good, just kind of anything, and it could be a question if you have a question about it. If you really want to know about the rapture, ask Randy. Just kidding. But yeah, so would anybody be willing to share? And I often call this, can someone give us the gift of going second? Which means you'll go first and give everyone else the gift of going second. So who wants to give someone else the gift of going second? By sharing just kind of what are you thinking? What do you feel?
Hey, Colby.
Yeah.
I told you this morning.
Oh, Megan's gonna pass the mic. That's a great idea, because this is a big room.
Like I said this morning, when this church had the vote of whether we were going to be a reconciling church or not, I made sure to take time off work and be here. And I wasn't out to the congregation then. Everybody knew me anyway, but nobody cared. But it was me. I was not comfortable being out then myself. But I have never. I'll be all right. I have never felt anything but love in this church from the first day I stepped through the door. Day one, I felt loved. I've never felt anything but that. And I want to share with you, it's just something that I've always said. Somebody tells me I'm wrong, I say, God made me, God don't make mistakes. So if you've got a problem with it, that's your problem, not God's problem.
One of the things, thank you for sharing. I don't know if you guys know Brene Brown, or work with Brene Brown. She's done a lot of contrasting belonging versus fitting in. And most churches and most social groups, etc., function on the premise of fitting in. And fitting in means you gotta sort of hack off parts of yourself, you gotta cram yourself into this mold, you gotta get yourself in line. That's what fitting in means. Belonging is very different. Belonging is you just belong as you are. You don't gotta hack off any parts, you don't gotta change, you don't gotta adapt. As humans, in our core, we have a longing to belong. We have a need to feel like we belong somewhere. And yet, most churches demand that we fit in. And we know the difference, don't we, Jeff? When we walk into a place where we just know belonging, I can breathe here. Oh, this is what my soul, I don't have to fit in here. I just belong. That's the magic. That's magic. Who else wants to share? Yeah, Randy?
So I want to ask you a specific question. I want to set the stage in my own context, which is a Methodist church. Methodist church is going through a split right now, divide over gender identity and LGBTQ issues, and really about who's welcome and who's not. A few years ago, there was a pastor of a United Methodist church very close to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. The church was called Foundry United Methodist, and the pastor was Phil Waterman. The church by itself is pretty progressive, it always has been. But it was also viewed, it was in newspapers and pictures regularly, that on many Sundays at that church, on one side of the sanctuary, Bob and Elizabeth Dole sat, who were Republicans and also Methodists. And on the other side of the church was Hillary and Bill Clinton, who were sitting there. And they worshiped together, and they sang together, and they read songs together. One of the conversations that's going on in my tribe, denomination, is that with the split, that is not going to be possible anymore. We won't have people who are diverse, like we talked about this morning. And we are moving into polarized camps in what once was a place where people who disagreed vehemently Monday through Friday could actually love Jesus together on Sundays and have some kind of continuity. So the question is specific. Do you see places in our world where people in diversity are actually in community and living together? Because in my world, that's not happening anymore. Even here, when we became reconciling, you and I talked, dozens of families got up and walked out who had been here forever. And And then we're attracting quite a few people, but they seem to be part of the same tribe. And so we're not getting people who disagree and wrestle with that. So I don't know if there's an answer to it, but at least in my world, that understanding of the community coming together, as you talked about this morning on Pentecost, and loving each other in the same area doesn't happen anymore. So I'm just curious if you saw places like that.
Yeah. Okay, I've got 3 thoughts in response. I'll go quick. The first is this. It is far more likely that you will find churches whose sort of institutional belief, their creed, churches that are more traditional and conservative, right? That for all intents and purposes are not affirming churches. It is far more likely that you will find liberal, progressive, affirming people that coexist and find a way to do community with more conservative tribes. Far more likely that you'll find that than the other side, which is affirming progressive churches like this, where you have conservative traditional folk that will find a way to live peaceably. One is far more likely than the other. And I've got maybe some conjecture as to why that is, but that's my first thought is, and I guess the one conjecture, the reason why I brought that up is because I have found, one of the questions people often ask me is, what's something you've learned from all of your relationships with and working with the queer community? What have you learned? And I mean, the list is long, but one of the things that comes to the top of the list is I have found that my queer siblings are some of the most compassionate, grace-filled, forgiving, patient people. Like, way more than most straight allies. Straight allies, we got the fire. We want to just come in and burn the place down. And I'm not saying that our queer siblings don't have the fire as well, but I have found, and it makes sense to me, many of them have had to navigate a world and navigate a family and navigate a community where they know in their core that they don't belong, and they have found a way to know what it's like to still love the people in their life. And so they have this immense compassion within them. And I think that spirit allows more progressively minded people to sort of exist within a more conservative framework. Whereas, and we talked a bit about this morning, whereas a more conservative minded person has a really hard time existing over here because if it really is all about love, as we said a minute ago, that's terrifying. For those in the more conservative fundamental, like the belief is everything. My fundamental belief over here is that I have to think the right thing about God, and that that's the only way that I'm going to be okay in life. And if you mess with any of these other beliefs, that's going to begin to undermine belief in general. That terrifies me. So I can't coexist in a place like this where now beliefs are so different because that threatens my very core existence. That's my first thought on that. My second thought is this. I wonder if people, Randy, and honestly, based on some of what I see in the room and where I'm at geographically, someone here might be able to actually share some insight into this. But I wonder if people were asking similar questions back in the 50s and 60s about segregation in the church.
Absolutely.
I wonder if they were saying, like, will there ever be a day when different races can worship together? Or is it just going to be like this forever? And I bring that up because I think if you were to take someone from, I don't know, I think we've come a long way. I think we've come a long way. Do we have a long way to go? Yeah, sure, of course. That's what makes us good progressives, by the way. Progress is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But progressives love to focus on the 1 step back. Not good enough, more work to do, which is great. That's how we keep progressing. But every once in a while, progressives, I invite us to just pause, turn around, reflect on how far we've come. Holy cow, we've come a long way. We've come a long way. It's good. But I wonder, so we're in the middle, you're in the middle of it right now. You are in the middle of this traumatic event happening within Methodism. And it makes sense to be like, is this just going to be the new reality? Maybe. I mean, it certainly was. We talked about at breakfast yesterday, the great schism, right? There have been some that have been irreparable. But I don't know. I don't know. Fast forward another 50 years, I don't know. Maybe we'll see more unity. And then the third thing that I wanted to say about that is what might make this different, part of what makes this so hard, because this isn't just people who think differently on baptism, this isn't just people who think differently on the rapture or on communion. This is really I believe this is really fundamentally a justice issue. In the same way that ending slavery was a justice issue, in the same way that ending segregation was a justice issue. And so it's affirming the dignity, the inherent worth and dignity of queer people is really not something that I'm all that ready to just be like, hey, but we can agree to disagree on. It's too important.
There is a radical difference though. This church has lost its social control on the community.
This church? Okay.
The denomination, churches in general.
Okay.
We have lost our social connection. In the Vietnam War and all of that, I went through all of that kind of stuff and working with folks. They would argue and they would fight at the board meeting. Sunday morning, they were back in church. Now they're not. They don't come back. I've talked to so many progressives who've just been worn out by the war, and they're not coming back to church. My daughter's been broken by the church. She didn't want anything to do with it. My son has been broken by the church. When he was excluded from the youth group, he attended, by the way, an evangelical church youth group where they embraced him and said, hey, we'd love to have you. So that's where he went. He had a cute girl there too, but that's another story. There's a difference when you have, 42% under 30s that are officially non-religious, but they're still asking the why questions. I think the church died. Altizer said God was going to die. No, the church died. We're being resurrected here in this church. This is a resurrection church. I was broken when I came here to a Sunday school class looking for a reconciling church. I'm sitting here listening and people going, well, how can we reach out to these people that are really hurt and broken? How can we reach out to the gay folk? How can we do transgender? I'm going, holy cow, this is a new experience. I was going, we're not going to reach out to anybody. We don't know why, the flag business. We don't, we want flag, Confederate flag. We're going to bring, my last church we're going to discuss how bringing guns to church. So it'll be okay. And people are dying around you. We've lost that social connection.
No, I think that's a good observation. You're absolutely right. I mean, culture is very different now. Church, and again, there are people in this room that can speak to this much better than I can. Church used to be like just part of culture, like just part of life. Like it was weird if people didn't go to church. Now that's just not the case. So your point is well taken, which is a lot of people that have.
If you go to church every Sunday.
Yeah, he said you're weird if you go to church every Sunday. That might.
I have a song I wrote called "I Love Jesus." Don't let that, don't let it worry you. I came to love, not to condemn. Because I tell folks I'm a Christian that's a pastor. They back off.
Sure.
They go, oh boy, I'm in trouble, especially if they're from the gay community. That breaks my heart.
The thing I would say about that, in wrapping that up, is saying, I think it's fair to say that the institution that we have come to know as church is certainly trending toward a kind of extinction. But that is just a thing that has been created. This building is just a thing that has been created. It's beautiful, it's lovely, and it serves great purposes. But the body of Christ, that's indestructible. So people may not go to a physical church anymore, but that doesn't have anything to do with their belonging in the larger body of Christ. And I certainly in my work have run into countless communities that have found alternative ways to do life together and to build a kind of social belonging that has nothing to do with the Sunday morning service. And so yeah, that might be more and more the norm. But for what it's worth, and this will wrap it up here. For what it's worth, I still believe in churches like this. I don't want churches like this to stop existing. I think you still serve a purpose. Scratch that. Rewind. I know you still serve a purpose. I mean, look at some of the folk who have found this community because other people have said, no, this place matters. You have believed in this place for years. And that belief is not in vain. That work is not in vain. That investment is not in vain. Right? So I still believe, I still think churches like this matter. We need you. We, meaning the human race, honestly. We need churches like this to exist. We need a place where families can come and know that they'll find belonging. Know that they're not going to be judged, condemned. Know that they're not going to be asked to fit in and forced into some sort of empire narrative where everybody thinks and looks the same. So I don't know what the future of the large C church is. It might be, I don't know. But I know that places like this matter. And I'll say it again, I said it this morning, and I'm darn proud of you in this room for your work. Keep it up. All right, Megan, you want to dismiss us with something? You had a song prepared. Go ahead. It was a cappella, I think you said?
Well, first I just...
Are you going to chicken out?
Maybe.
You guys, she was practicing at the house, and I heard her and everything.
But I did want to say that I second what Jeff said, is that, being the parent of a transgender child, and everyone else shutting us out as a family, and don't know what to do with that. We don't know what to say to you anymore. Coming here has been just like, the moment I walked in, I just felt like I belonged. And, going to a very scary school board meeting where everyone was spewing hate, basically, but me, and half of this congregation sitting right here was sitting right there with me that day. And that is love. Milton was there. And I think just the sustainability that he talked about of, tapping into that, knowing that no matter what the world tells me, no matter what the world tells you, if you know that you're a beloved child of God, you can tap into God's love and reflect that beautiful colors to, the world, to anyone. And to the sustainability of the love is I think, it's a very good point. It's kind of a secret, if we can all sustain that love so that we can give it to each other, it just makes so much sense to me, and I wanted to say that, so I appreciate that. But anyway, appreciate you guys coming tonight. This has been a fabulous weekend. It meant so much to me to have Colby. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you for inviting everybody.
I hope he'd say yes. Anyway, let's bow and say a quick prayer before we go tonight. Dear God, we love this church. We thank you so much for the people in it, for those that we reach, for Colby coming this weekend, and traveling all the way from California just for us. Lord, it makes us feel loved, and it's wonderful. And I just can't thank you enough for showing me personally your love through this church. And we just want to be a beacon of your light, of your unconditional love to those in our community, whoever they might be, however they might identify. They're always welcome here, Lord, and we will proceed into the world and do your holy work